You're listening to A Slice of Therapy with me, Alun Parry. So what I'd like to talk about in this episode is what I would refer to as the myth of the single self. The idea that we often have that we are just this one self, that this is who we are, and in all situations we show up as this. And the problem with having that idea of things is that when we ever encounter something different, especially if it's something that feels significant, maybe a significant issue, and we notice that single self kind of breaking and splinter into different parts, that we automatically think we're going crazy rather than this being a normal expression of how people are. And so what I want to talk about the multiplicitous self. I don't know if that's a word, I've just made it up and it may well be, but if it is, it's coincidental. But this idea of the multiplicitous self is an acceptance of the fact that actually there isn't just one of us, but that we are a constituency of multiple parts. Because once we realise that we're a constituency of multiple parts, we can actually bring all of us, into the picture on any decision, on any thought process or whatever. When we expect ourselves to be just one indivisible self, then it means that in order to continue that myth, we have to stuff parts of ourselves down. It can even lead us to not sharing the fullness of ourselves and thinking of ourselves as a constituency, as a multiplicity of different parts with different interests. We can actually stop the sharing of our fullest self because we don't want other people to know that we have these different parts going on. Because what if they don't? And so when we buy into this myth of the single indivisible self, it not only makes us push down parts of ourselves to us, but it stops us sharing our fullness to others as well, because we're under this misapprehension that they're just this single indivisible self and that it's us that isn't. In actual fact, we come across these parts of ourselves very, very often. And a lot of the time we pass over them. We even talk about them in conversation. It's like, if it's not a heavy issue, we kind of allow this multiplicity. So I don't know whether you've had an invite somewhere and you think, well, part of me really wants to go, but another part of me just wants to stay in and watch the telly. Now, do you hear the language there? And you've probably used that before, but you hear what I've said. A part of me wants to go. Another part of me wants to stay home. And so straight away, in that moment, we explode the myth of the single indivisible self. Because what we've got there is two parts to ourselves who are in contradiction to each other. One of which wants to go out and take up the invite, and the other one just wants to stay in and watch telly. And then suddenly you're not this single indivisible self, but you're a little mini council of parts of yourself. And I think it's really important because imagine if this was a bigger issue, a more significant issue that we don't just kind of pass over so quickly and so lightly. To bring in all parts of ourselves into the discussion, into the equation, means that we acknowledge all parts of ourselves. The part that feels resentful and the part that feels appreciative. You see, what it opens up that can't open up with this myth of the single indivisible self is a both and mentality. When you're dealing with the single indivisible self, you're always in a case of either or, because you can either be this person or you can be that person. You can't be both at once. And what this idea about multiplicity allows is actually for us to be both and. It actually allows for us to be many and A part of me feels resentful. A part of me feels interested. A part of me feels curious. A part of me feels suspicious. And that could be about the whole, like all of those things could be just about one particular issue. And when you think back into your own life, I'm sure you'll recognize this too, where you might have felt the pull of different parts over a particular issue, all at the same time, where a part of you feels really interested and curious, another part of you feels wary, another part of you might feel excited, and another part of you might feel maybe afraid. And all of these parts can show up at the exact same time. And so given that this is the case, and that your experience no doubt will bear this out, what it means is that when we think of ourselves as an indivisible self, then we really have to stifle all of those other parts that are showing up. Like in that example then, 4 different parts showed up in response to that situation. The scared part, the suspicious part, the interested part, the curious part. Now, if I only allow myself one indivisible self, the only way I can get that is by really stuffing down the other 3 parts. And then, in fact, I'm only showing up as a quarter of myself, aren't I? And so it's really important, I think, to just acknowledge that we are this little constituency. We are this little collective, this collective community, I suppose, that we are kind of navigating and negotiating all the time. And perhaps the biggest example of this, and I guarantee that this exists, there will be somebody, many people in fact, there will be many people who at times will go through what we call suicidal ideation. They might think about that, but at the same time will meticulously take their vitamins, will make sure that their vitamins are paid for and ordered so that they can stay healthy. Now, this might seem a contradiction, but once you get into that sense of both and, then it allows both of those to be there, and you neither be one or the other, but both can be acknowledged and honoured. You see, we are a mass of contradictions, each and every one of us. Even at any one time on one particular issue, we will have a collection of different thoughts and feelings about something that's going on in life or something that we're responding to. And I suppose in this episode, I want to just put a shout out to that and say, well, this is normal. This is the typical, usual way of going about things. That if you're worried that these multiplicity of parts are showing up, well, you needn't be, because that's how we are as human beings. And what you can do instead is start to get curious about which of these parts is showing up, what they need individually, what are they responding to. And it gives you a fuller, richer, more textured outlook on oneself and on life. And then when you share yourself to others, you can actually share yourself more fully as well. You can actually bring all of this nuance to the table and share that richer version of you too. And so I think that's all I'll say. A part of me wants to carry on, but another part of me thinks it's probably a good time to finish. And as the kind of the wisest version of me, kind of adjudicate over these different parts, I'm going to choose the part that thinks it's a good time to wrap up. So next time that you notice that you have a number of different responses to the same situation, that's okay, because you'll find that that's a really typical thing. I experience it. I think pretty much everybody experiences it. And if you don't experience that and you are this single indivisible self, well, that's okay too. But for the most of us, I would say that these parts that show up, these kind of contradictory pulls and pushes that we have in response to the things that happen in our life are pretty typical. And so by acknowledging that, we can bring our fullest selves to ourselves, to others, and to the life that we live. But it also means as well that when we are down in the dumps, when we are struggling, and this is a time of year, isn't it, where we can struggle, that we can also reach out to those other parts of ourselves that are not maybe so clear, but we know must be there because we are a multiplicity. That the part of us that really is struggling, the part of us that really does feel down, the part of us that doesn't really feel interested anymore, it allows us to just seek out that contradictory part, that opposite part, the part that really is focused on life, the part that is really curious, the part that is interested in how things are going to show up, the part that is ready to fight for something different, the part that is appreciative of the good things and will seek out what they are. It allows us to find that part of ourselves that is more resourceful, even in those times when they might seem in the darkest of corners. Because once we know that we are a multiplicity, a community, a collective, and a collection of responses, we can kind of know that even in our darkest moments, those other parts that are willing to fight for us are there as well. If you found this episode useful, please do share it so other people can get the benefits as well. If you'd like to work with me directly, I'm Alun Parry, and you can find more about me at liverpoolpsychotherapy.co.uk. And of course, you don't have to be local to me because I work online, so you can be based absolutely anywhere. And of course, please subscribe to the podcast as well, because it's absolutely free and it means that you'll never miss an episode again. So thanks for listening, and I'll see you again on the next one.